Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor. We appreciate your braving the iciness and the snow to join us together here in person this morning for those of you that are with us in person. And for those of you who might be live streaming at this very moment from home, we appreciate you too and hope that you're having a nice toasty warm beverage as you've made a different choice with the snow and the ice potentially. However you may be joining us, wherever you may be this morning, we offer a warm welcome to you as we gather once again in the spirit of community. Our congregation has been meeting continuously here in Southeast Michigan in the city of Ann Arbor since 1865, helping bring alive a vision of progressive spirituality, one in which each of us is encouraged to learn and discover who we are as human beings, how we're living into our best and highest potential, and as we do so with the love and care and support of one another. It's in that spirit that I welcome you. I'm the Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti, serving our community as senior minister, and alongside me in today's service are the Reverend Cassandra Hartley, our Minister for Community Life, Stella Anderson, our Director of Spiritual Growth and Development, Carter Smith, our Acting Director of Music Ministries, Allison Halerz, our Pianist-in-Residence, Mike Halerz, our Technological Consultant. We just heard from the Chalice bells. Thanks to each of you for coming in early this morning on a icy and snowy morning. And in just a little bit, we'll also be hearing from Sally Preston and Cecile Bridges, who will be sharing with us more about our Social Justice Council. A couple of important announcements as we deepen our time together. Following both of our services, including this one, immediately after the service in the social hall where we have our coffee time, opportunities to informally connect with one another, there will be a meet and greet with our community's new administrator, head of our administrative and finance functions, Deb Markham. Some of you may have already had a chance to meet Deb, but others of you might not have, and I want to encourage you, especially if you haven't had a chance yet, to say hello and introduce yourself. Please join us in the social hall. You'll have a chance to greet her, introduce yourself, and if you have any questions about those administrative or finance functions, it's a great opportunity to ask some of those questions as well. In addition to that opportunity following the service today, Deb will also be hosting and leading 2 upcoming budget information sessions. So these are opportunities to learn more about our budget and fundraising operations here in our community. The first of these will be on Tuesday, November 29th at 6:30 p.m. The second will be on Tuesday, December 13th at 6:30 p.m. Both of these will be virtually. And if you are interested in this, please drop Deb an email in order to register. She'll make sure you get a link. You can do that by writing to deb@uuaa.org. Whether you are joining us in person or live streaming or on demand, if you're a newcomer, we are delighted that you've chosen to spend a little bit of time with us this morning and get to know us better. Particularly as the fall has been progressing, I've had the opportunity to meet folks who've said to me, you know, we only found First UU Ann Arbor during the pandemic, and we've been diligently following you all virtually, but this is our very first time coming here to check you out in person. It's been a common story that I've heard over the course of this fall. If that applies to you, and you may be joining us in person for the first time, welcome. If you're live streaming or watching on demand later and you're one of those folks who has been checking us out only virtually, please know that we welcome your continuing to do that. And if the opportunity ever arose to be with us in person, we would want to greet you warmly and well. If you are indeed joining us in person and you're relatively new to the community, following the conclusion of today's service, out those double doors in the Redmond room will be an opportunity to meet a member of our community and learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our congregation specifically. If you're new and you're in our live stream at the moment, I encourage you to take just a moment and introduce yourself in the chat. Please say hello. Let us know your name and where you're joining us from, whether it's Ann Arbor, another city, or even just your living room. There will be members of our community who I know will want to warmly greet you and welcome you. If you're joining us on demand later in the week, please take a moment to go to UUAA.org, where we have a newcomers survey. There, if you take just a quick moment to fill that out, it'll allow us to stay in touch with you and share important information with you about upcoming events. In addition to that, any member of the staff team, up to and including myself, would be delighted to hear from you if you wanted to reach out to us and answer any questions that you might have. This Sunday, as we reflect on the theme of change and our broader societal currents, the cultural time that we find ourselves in, I know that others of us here today might be holding in our hearts with heaviness some of the news that we received overnight that I am also holding with heaviness in my own heart. The latest mass shooting which occurred overnight at an LGBT club and gathering place for community in Colorado Springs, with at least 5 dead and 18 more shot and injured. This was a community that was actively preparing in a relatively conservative area to honor and commemorate the Transgender Day of Remembrance today, TDOR, in their town with a special brunch. We hold in our hearts all those who have suffered and died and been harmed or gone missing, particularly on this Transgender Day of Remembrance, particularly in light of this overnight shooting attacking the LGBTQIA community in Colorado Springs. It's in that spirit that I want to invite you to join me in a brief moment of silence, if you would. We Unitarian Universalists are a people who have always been committed to honoring our ever-evolving understandings of what it means to be human by squarely facing the changing times that we are in, rather than rejecting or denying the changes that are needed in order to more fully honor human dignity and equality. It's in that spirit that I invite each of us to hold in our hearts, both today and in the days ahead, an honoring of this, our 23rd annual Transgender Day of Remembrance, a day in which we commemorate and honor those from among our trans siblings who have experienced violence and death at the hands of a society that can be cruel in the face of difference. May we continue to honor and hold that in our hearts as we deepen this time together in worship today. We are gathered for worship.
Good morning. Now is the time in our service when we light our chalice. It's a reminder of our connections to one another in this community, our connections to Unitarian Universalists all over the world, and our connections to our living tradition. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all just zoom out of our own sanctuary and high up into the sky so that we could see flaming chalices scattered across the globe? This morning, I am delighted to invite any 4th or 5th graders. There are so many kids here that I had to limit it, which is a very good thing. Any 4th or 5th graders that would like to come up and help light the chalice, please come on up to the chancel. For our members, friends, and guests that are joining us remotely, I invite you to light a chalice of your own and share your location with us in the chat, or just write "Chalice Lit," that we may be together, if not in body, then in spirit. Together, let us say, "We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace." Thank you. Another way that we begin our time together is by reciting the words of our covenant. As UUs, we are not bound by a single creed, but by the promises we make to one another about how we will be together as a faith community of seekers, committed to transformative love and justice. So whether you're joining us for the first time or you have these words memorized, please join me as we say together, "The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another." Thank you.
I invite you to rise and embody your spirit as we join together in singing number 1052, "The Oneness of Everything." Number 1052. Far beyond the grasp of hands, or light to meet the eye, past the reaches of the mind. There find the key to nature's harmony in an architecture so entwined. Like the birds whose patterns grace the sky and carry all who join in love expanding, the message of peace will rise in flight, taking the weight of the world upon its wings, in the oneness of everything. Peace is in the dance of trees who stir before the first breath of wind is yet perceived. Trust in the songs becoming one with the dance, and all mysteries can be believed. Songs of lives long past that touch our own are written in the earth, ever giving, and now to maintain the harmony gives to us all lives worth living. For the oneness of everything. Still we seek to find a truth that we might understand and reduce in terms defined. just might I know the faith that winters in the heart to be reborn in spring, to hear and to feel the pulse of life, enters my soul as a song to sing of the oneness of everything.
Our time for all ages this morning invites us to rewind a couple of years, back to 2020, when COVID came into our lives, as we consider all the ways that the world and our place in it has changed. The Great Realization, written by Thomas Roberts, as told by Tom Foolery, with art by Namoko. Tell me the one about the virus again, then I'll go to bed. But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head. Please, that one's my favorite, I promise. Just once more, take me back to 2020. That's all I'm asking for. Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well. The story starts before then, in a world I once would dwell. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across the lands, but they swelled and got much bigger than we ever could have planned. We'd always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have anything you dreamed of in a day and with a click. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes grew squarer and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. Every day, the skies grew thicker till you couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, 'cause our waste was never capped. Until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why it's best to not upset the lobbies, more convenient to die. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The governments reacted, told us all to hide away. But while we were all hidden, amidst the fear and all the while, we dusted off our instincts. We remembered how to smile. We started clapping to say thank you and calling up our moms. And while the car keys gathered dust, we would look forward to our runs. And with the skies less full of voyagers, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches bore new wildlife that scuttled off into the seas. Some people started dancing, some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but there was good news in the making. Old habits became extinct, and they made way for the new. and every simple act of kindness was now given its due. And so when we found the cure and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found to the one we'd left behind. But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together? Well, sometimes you get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. So lie down and dream of tomorrow and all the things that we can do. And who knows, if you dream hard enough, maybe some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started and why hindsight's 20/20. The end. So, a lot has happened in the 2 years since this book was written and published. Maybe it seems a little naive in retrospect. Our country remains deeply divided, and it turns out that the cure was not really a cure at all, just another tool in our arsenal. COVID is still a huge threat. Kids are back in school for the most part, but they're still struggling with academic and social-emotional learning loss. There does seem to be a drive to go back to business as usual, to pretend that we can just move on without any sort of reckoning. But I think if we step back, we can still find those glimmers of change and hope. My stepmother taught me to bake sourdough back in the summer of 2020, and I still bake every 2 weeks. We all spend more time outdoors, having come to appreciate the simple pleasures of nature. And even though they're back in school and socializing with friends again, my kids are closer than they were before the pandemic, and I'm confident that the bond they forged through that shared experience will be a blessing for them for their whole lives. Change is slow, sometimes excruciatingly so, but we keep working diligently, even in the face of enormous, sometimes overwhelming challenges. When I was little, my dad used to make us watch the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers films from the 1930s, like Shall We Dance and Top Hat. I pretended not to like them, but the truth is I was mesmerized. And my favorite was Swing Time. Does anyone know Swing Time? Some of you? The best scene in Swing Time is when Fred's character, Lucky, pretends to not know how to dance, as Roger's character, Penny, tries to teach him some basic moves. He trips and stumbles over his own feet, and she declares him hopeless. And then Lucky sings. These lyrics have always stayed with me, and I hope they can inspire you too. And I'm not going to sing them, I'm just going to say them. Nothing's impossible, I have found, for when my chin is on the ground, I pick myself up, dust myself off, and start all over again. Don't lose your confidence if you slip. Be grateful for a pleasant trip, and pick yourself up, dust yourself off, start all over again. May we all find the courage to start all over again, over and over. Now is the time in our service when we sing our children to their programs. The kindergarten through 5th graders are invited to follow me to a music and worship children's chapel just down the hall in the Jackson Chapel. Caregivers are welcome to stay here, or you can come along with us as the congregation sings us out with love and tenderness.
Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are mine. People are mine, your people are my people, your divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people, your people are mine, your
Once a month in our Sunday services, we have what's called a social justice connection, which is an opportunity to hear more about the justice work that our community is doing, often in partnership with other local organizations. This Sunday, we'll be hearing from Sally Preston and Cecile Bridges, who are our leadership for our Social Justice Council. And they will share more with us about what our Social Justice Council does. Would you join me in welcoming Sally and Cecile into the pulpit?
Good morning. It's good to see all of you. I'm Sally Preston, and I'm here this morning, today, in my role as the co-chair of the Social Justice Council. Social justice work has been a focus of UUAA since its inception, and the Council has helped to facilitate that work over 2 decades. Our mission is to coordinate, support, and inspire the congregation's efforts to advocate, educate, organize, serve, and witness for social action, and to establish UUAA as a leader for social justice. The Social Justice Council's work is inspired by UUAA's core values and the 3 vision priority areas: radical welcome, anti-racism, anti-oppression, climate justice, and climate action. The Council reviews applications to form new social justice groups. We help existing groups. We hold occasional educational roundtables and other events. And we submit a budget each year for all of the social justice work that our groups want to do. We consolidate the requests and present it to Deb Markham, actually, to include in the budget. I joined the Social Justice Council in 2014 after reading an ad in the newsletter for an treasurer for the council. As an introvert, I found that reaching out and getting involved helped me become more connected to this community. I met new people, I learned about our many social justice efforts, and I began to feel engaged at a much deeper level. The message I want to share with you is that social justice is a way to expand your involvement and sense of community with UUAA. It also aligns with our covenant when each week we say, service is our law. Volunteers are the lifeblood of the work that we do, and the benefits to volunteers is the connection it brings to this beloved community. Perhaps becoming a volunteer or changing the volunteer work that you are doing is a change that would benefit you at this time. The Social Justice Council and many of the social justice group needs involvement from more members of the community. Specifically, the council is looking to add 2 new members to our council. One that would focus on communication and someone who would be a note taker and help us keep organized with our council documents. If you want to know more about that, please come and see me in the social hall after the service. The council also keeps track and helps promote social justice groups. One way we do that is with this brochure that we created several years ago. It lists all of the social justice groups we have and gives a brief description of what they do. We hand this out to newcomers. It's in our brochure rack at the front of the entryway. It's on our website under social justice groups, and it's available in the social justice hall. We printed many, many, many copies of this so that you could each have one, so come and get yours. I now want to introduce Cecile Bridges, who is my co-chair on the council, and she'll describe the other effort that we make, the Social Justice Connection, as a way to connect social justice groups with our congregation.
So thank you, Sally, and good morning, everybody. Each year, we have been fortunate to have one of the social justice groups presenting to the congregation what they are doing. It's usually the 3rd Sunday of the month. This is an opportunity for each social justice group to present its purpose, goals, future endeavors, to engage the congregation, and to possibly seek new members. We all need new members. The short presentation gives each group the chance to be visible to the congregation by informing others about the work it is doing, and if appropriate, how it relates to UU's three principles, or three priority areas: climate action, climate justice, radical welcome, anti-racism, and anti-oppression. I'm currently taking requests for the 2023, so if any of the social justice leaders haven't contacted me yet, I have sent out a lot of emails, please do so. You can stop by the social hall, the table, and also get more information. So thank you for listening. We invite you to stop by our table at the social hall after the service to learn more how you can be more connected. Thank you.
In that spirit of supporting the good work of community, we recognize that all of what we do together, all of what we build and create, the ability to gather for the opportunity to share inspiration, to learn and grow together, to gather for the purposes of supporting one another, caring for one another, showing up as the embodiment of love, the work of building and moving our community and world towards deeper justice, all of that is made possible through your generous financial contributions to this community and the work that it engages in. In just a moment, the ushers will come down the aisles and collect, for those of us that are gathered in person, this morning's offering. You may do so if you're with us in person by leaving a check or a cash donation in the baskets as they come around. If you're joining us in the live stream, you can go to uuaa.org/giving. That's a website, and you can select weekly offering as the fund to donate to. If you'd like to donate via text, you can text UUAA to 73256, and that donation will reach us. With so much appreciation and gratitude for all the ways in each of you, each of us, help support and build this community, today's offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you, Chalice bells. With appreciation for all the gifts that we share with one another, simple and more fulsome ones, I invite the ushers to bring today's offering forward, and I invite those of us that are gathered in person to please rise as you are comfortably able, in body or spirit, as we join together in the familiar words of our community's dedication. Would you join your voices as we say together, "To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings." May it be so. Thank you. Please be seated.
I invite you to turn to number 1009, Meditation on Breathing. Let us join together in singing number 1009.
Our reading this morning is an excerpt from the book Sharing Silence by Gunilla Norris. Within each of us, there is a silence as vast as the universe. We are afraid of it, and we long for it. When we experience that silence, we remember who we are, creatures of the stars, created from the cooling of this planet, created from dust and gas, created from the elements, created from time and space, created from silence. In our present culture, silence is something like an endangered species, an endangered fundamental. The experience of silence is now so rare that we must cultivate it and treasure it. This is especially true for shared silence. Sharing silence is, in fact, a political act. When we can stand aside from the usual and perceive the fundamental, change begins to happen. Our lives align with deeper values, and the lives of others are touched and influenced. Silence brings us back to basics, to our senses, to ourselves. It locates us. Without that return, we can go so far away from our true natures that we end up quite literally, beside ourselves. We endanger the delicate balance which sustains our lives, our communities, our planet. Each of us can make a difference. Politicians and visionaries will not return us to the sacredness of life. That will be done by ordinary men and women who together or alone can say, remember to breathe, remember to feel, remember to care. Let us do this for our children and ourselves and our children's children. Let us practice for life's sake. Let us join together now in a time of shared silence. Today is one of those special days as a minister because I had the chance in between the two services to witness several people signing the membership book to officially become members of this community. It's always a beautiful and meaningful ceremony that I feel honored to be a part of. And it's hard to believe that in a few months, it will be 10 years since I was the one signing that book. I know that that's not much time compared to some of our longtime members who count their anniversaries in multiple decades, but it's certainly a big enough number to give me pause. At the time when I signed the book, my family had been attending regularly and had found a warm and welcoming home here, especially for my son with multiple special needs. I had just graduated from divinity school and was completing my internship at the Church of the Larger Fellowship. So the senior minister at the time, the Reverend Gail Geisenhainer, gave me several opportunities to guest preach. She graciously became one of my mentors and treated me as a colleague rather than just a student. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about a particular lesson that she taught me around the time that I signed the book. That year, General Assembly, our association's national annual gathering, was being held in Louisville, Kentucky. The ministers in our state were arranging carpools to go down there together, and I was lucky enough to end up carpooling with Reverend Gail. I was relieved because she loved to drive, unlike me, and the 6-hour car ride gave us plenty of time to talk as the landscape flew by. One of those conversations turned to same-sex marriage, which of course was an issue that our congregation was working hard on. I expressed how restless and upset I was feeling about the pushback against it and against LGBTQAI rights in general. Given how passionate and vocal Reverend Gail is about social justice issues, I expected her to jump onto my righteous indignation bandwagon right away. But instead, I felt her energy become very calm and grounded. I don't remember exactly word for word what she said next, but it was essentially this: the older I get, the less I worry, because I can see the bigger picture. I can see that change happens slowly, sometimes almost imperceptibly, but it changes. Sometimes issues reach a critical mass and seem to change rapidly overnight, but the groundwork was laid long before that. When I look back a decade or two, it can feel like we're not making much progress, but when I look back across my entire life, I see that we have, and I trust in that. As a Unitarian Universalist, I had quoted the abolitionist Unitarian minister Theodore Parker many times. The paraphrased version of his words, used often by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., are, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." This quote has long been a source of comfort and inspiration for me and so many others because it encourages us to step back and see the bigger picture. Reverend Gale was affirming a similar point, and yet that day, as I watched the Louisville skyline come into view, it sunk in for me in deeper ways than before. Of course, just 2 years later, I stood in this exact spot and made a video of this congregation cheering "Love Wins" in response to the Supreme Court's decision to legalize same-sex marriage. Today, as I stand here, the conservative Supreme Court seems to threaten those rights again, and we are freshly mourning another act of violence. And yet, a bipartisan bill to support same-sex marriage and interracial marriage on a federal level has just been advanced. And much to my surprise as a former Mormon, the Church of the Latter-day Saints, which heavily supported Prop 8 in California, has come out in support of this bill. These are small steps, to be sure, but they are steps nonetheless. Over the course of centuries, human rights in general have made incredible advancements. And while we hear about violence and destruction every day in the news, and this violence is real and devastating, many studies indicate that globally, violence has gone down dramatically in recent decades. There is progress on several fronts, and yet I don't have to tell you that the last few years have been a time of incredible change, complexity, and upheaval. We were already facing the existential threats of climate change and nuclear war, but those issues have become even more urgent and present. And layered on top of them are things like more pandemics, authoritarianism, polarization, threats to democracy, and so on. Lenin once said, "There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen." In the case of this recent time period, I would add, there are years when centuries happen. Amidst all this change and the global trauma of COVID, it's been easy at times to get caught up in the fear, the hopelessness, exhaustion, contraction. And so I keep returning to this practice of stepping back to see the bigger picture, of looking for subtle shifts and trends. When I do that, I do still see real possibility and hope. What I can see can probably be best summed up by the words of the Buddhist teacher and writer Tara Brach. In her recent talk entitled "The Calling of These Times," Brach said, "To me, the most helpful way to view our whole trajectory is that we're cultivating wider and wider senses of belonging, of wholeness, of who we are. That's where the healing is." Essentially, she's saying that our world is moving toward a greater recognition of our inherent interdependence and unity. Drawing on her Buddhist tradition, she calls this awakening to love. This awakening, in turn, is fostering more connection and collaboration with each other and with the earth itself, which of course is necessary if we're going to save our species and our planet. As Unitarian Universalists, we understand the importance of this idea because we lift it up in our seventh principle and in our social justice work. And yet, how can we square her quiet confidence that we're moving in that direction with the environmental degradation and polarization that we see all around us? I do think it's important to recognize that while some people are moving toward a greater sense of connection, there are still many people who feel separate and afraid. In this state of fear, they are more susceptible to ideologies that offer the illusion of power and safety. They're also susceptible to acting out with hatred and violence. Of course, those of us who are committed to compassion and justice can get caught up in fear and reactivity at times too. We don't always bring our best selves. That's just human nature. But when fear isn't getting the best of us, there are many ways that we are creating wider, healthier connections with ourselves and with others. For example, in recent years, people have started better understanding and opening up about their mental health struggles. Celebrities and even royalty like Prince Harry have talked candidly about what they're going through, giving a public voice to a widespread but often silent experience. In the business world, more and more leaders are embracing concepts like vulnerability, self-care, family work-life balance, and collaboration as essential elements of a healthy company culture. Many schools have included social-emotional learning alongside traditional academics in their curricula. And many schools now have classes and extracurricular activities focused on things like meditation, yoga, diversity and inclusion, spending time in nature, and mental health. While some bemoan the loss of traditional family values, non-traditional families, which is to say the statistical majority of families, are finally starting to be recognized and celebrated in everything from greeting cards to diaper commercials. People are also starting to recognize that sometimes romantic or family relationships are unhealthy and need to be changed or ended. More and more research is being done on the effects of trauma, including the ways that trauma can pass down from generation to generation in families. So people are committing themselves to healing these traumas and ending toxic patterns through therapy, somatic work, support groups, and more. Although pop culture often gets a bad rap, I think it's an important place to look for trends. When I look at pop culture right now, I think it's significant that people like Meghan Trainor, a singer normally known for her light, fun, danceable songs, released a song recently called Bad For Me, which talks about being in therapy and ending a toxic relationship with a family member. I think it's significant that the popular Netflix TV show called Made openly explores both physical and emotional domestic abuse. I think it's significant that on social media, there are countless experts as well as everyday people talking about things like setting boundaries, developing healthy attachments, building empathy, and practicing self-compassion. Speaking of social media, I do recognize that we're in the midst of a very real global epidemic of loneliness, and social media can exacerbate this loneliness. It can be used to create echo chambers, stoke hatred, spread misinformation. But as the COVID shutdown taught us, social media and other online tools can also connect us in creative new ways as well. Even before the shutdown, people were using online tools to create a global community that we never could have imagined even 50 years ago. For example, my sons have a rare genetic condition called albinism. The people I know with albinism who were born before the internet faced incredible bullying, isolation, and lack of access to accurate medical information. People in the albinism community still face these things, of course, but we're also able to lean on each other for support and use public platforms to educate people. With just a click of a button, we can connect with friends in the albinism community across the state, across the country, across the world. Another example is the way that people, especially young people, are using social media to celebrate their diverse perspectives and make new connections. On any given day when I get on Instagram, for example, I might see a post from a young Maori man in New Zealand teaching te reo Maori, or the traditional Maori language, through his videos. Or I might see a post from a young Inuk woman practicing traditional throat singing with her mother. Or I might see a post from the young professional ice skater in Montreal who identifies as Russian, Ghanaian, and Canadian, and who uses his skating videos to challenge traditional ideas about race and gender. Those perspectives and so many more expand me and change me every day in ways that weren't possible before. I could go on citing more examples of how a wider and healthier sense of belonging is showing up in every area from art to religion to literature and more. It doesn't mean that progress is inevitable, of course, but it does mean that we can see glimpses of what is possible, and we can nurture those possibilities. Nurturing these possibilities, especially while we're still in the midst of such a complex and messy time, means we need to develop regular spiritual practices that help us to process and reconnect. Practices that, as Gunilla Norris puts it in our reading today, help us to stand aside from the usual and perceive the fundamental, so that our lives can realign with deeper values. These practices might look like the silence we shared, gathering together in community each week, working for justice, spending time in nature, keeping a gratitude journal, dancing, singing, meditating, painting, knitting, practicing play and joy, and so much more. Probably the most important, but sometimes hardest practice of all is resting. I don't just mean resting physically, although that's important too, but also resting emotionally, spiritually, mentally. Our nervous systems haven't always caught up to the vast amount of information and change constantly being thrown at us. And as activists like Tricia Hersey, author of the book Rest is Resistance, reminds us, rest is an essential tool for healing, disrupting unjust systems, and dreaming our way to a better future. In our children's story today, the narrator was someone who lived through the pandemic and went on to tell their own children about how it was a powerful and positive turning point for humanity. Now it's been nearly 3 years since the shutdown, so as Stella pointed out, we might be tempted to say that the story didn't turn out so happily after all. And yet, in the big picture of things, 3 years is the blink of an eye. We're nowhere close to the end of this story, and we're helping to write each chapter. If we can find the spiritual practices we need to help us stay grounded, and if we can keep our eyes on the bigger picture, maybe someday people will tell their children stories about all the great realizations our world had on the way to creating something better. It may not even come in our lifetime, but we can do our part to nurture something more beautiful and more whole. As Gunilla Norris puts it, remember to breathe, remember to feel, remember to care. Let us do this for our children and ourselves and our children's children. Let us practice for life's sake. Amen, and may it be so.
Is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? I invite you to rise in body or spirit as we join together in singing our closing song, Change is Coming. It's not in either hymnal. I'll invite you to sing the chorus with me. The words are, change is coming, what do we need to imagine? And as we sing that together, Allison and I will sing verses over that. Let's join in singing. Change is coming, what do we need to imagine? Change is coming, what do we need to imagine? Change is coming, what do we need to imagine? Change is coming, what do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine to be prepared? I know I'm scared to be prepared. 'Cause I know I'm scared to be prepared. 'Cause I know I'm scared to be prepared. 'Cause I know I'm scared. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine?
As our time comes to a close, beloveds, may we remember that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to feel hopeless at times. But may we also remember that we are part of a larger story, a story of love and connection, a story of possibility. We live out this story each time we gather together in community, and we hold it in our hearts as we go forth into the week ahead. May it be so, and blessed be.
Is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine to be prepared? 'Cause I know I'm scared to be prepared. 'Cause I know I'm scared. Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do